Breaking into KCAL News Channel 9 right now to give you some breaking news and an update as we continue to monitor immigration raids, protests happening across Southern California. You're taking a live look at KCAL right now as continued protests and clashes with federal law enforcement. We're maintaining an eye on that right now. This is out of Paramount at the moment. This has been the primary area we've been keeping an eye on throughout the day so far. Once again, taking a live look at KCAL right now, you see a couple of protesters. There was some peeking in there at the top of your screen, waving a flag, and then at least another flag. It looks like from our vantage point that is a Mexican flag coming out of a couple car windows and from a couple protesters. You see the line established there by law enforcement right on the edge of the road. Right now there is, looks like, moving in a different flag as well in the middle of this established skirmish line with law enforcement and with protesters. Now, this has been something that we've been monitoring, of course, for you going back to the last 24 hours as immigration protests started in downtown LA, as immigration operations were happening across the area reportedly. And right now, the latest that what we know started today. This was once again in Paramount. LA County Sheriff's Department confirming with us that another protest happened in this area as it appeared that federal law enforcement officers were conducting another operation. Now, the department said in a statement that a large crowd was at one point blocking traffic in the 6400 block of Paramount Boulevard. This was more than an hour and a half ago, around 12:42 in the afternoon. Now, after repeated follow-ups that we were keeping an eye on there, as again, you're taking a live look from KCAL, you see what looks like police tape on the ground and multiple protesters engaging with law enforcement right now, some getting up close, seemingly yelling in their faces, but nothing really incredibly out of control at the moment, especially from what we saw going back to last night when we were taking a look at tear gas and other non-lethals being deployed to try and disperse crowds and seemingly try to keep things under control, at least from law enforcement's perspective. Now, going back to what we were mentioning just a couple of seconds ago, CHP confirmed to us that officers were preparing for protesters at one point earlier today to try to march onto the 710 freeway. As of an hour and a half ago, we did not see that, haven't seen that as of yet, but right now, this has been a very fluid situation going into the morning and these early afternoon hours right now. Giving you a wider perspective, notice how right there on the freeway, it seems, traffic is going smoothly, but notice two sets of law enforcement vehicles sort of blocking off the road, so you really can't get to anything on the road there. So this is the other side of things that we were looking at. You just see 1, 2, 3, 4, at least 8 vehicles blocking off this street right now. And then earlier we were showing you that line of law enforcement officers and protesters standing in each other's faces. This seems to be another group of protesters as well down here on this part of the street. As we take a zoom in here, trying to get a clear view of what's going on, but it just looks like overturned shopping carts and a couple of people going around, looks like cinder blocks there on the ground as well. So it's been a lot going on right now. What else we can tell you, this was confirmed earlier this afternoon. The LA County Fire Department said one person at one point was transported to a local hospital from the scene in Paramount, seemingly around Paramount Boulevard at around 12:45. The extent of those injuries not yet clear, but one person taken to the hospital. As we continue to monitor this situation, no, we've had a photographer in the area throughout the morning, keeping an eye on the situation. We also have, as you see, some gas there fuming in the middle of the street in Paramount. We have another crew headed down to the scene here as well. Our Zach Boeto is going to get a ground eye perspective for us as we continue to monitor this situation. This is video from earlier in the day as protesters tried to block a U.S. Marshals service bus, is what it looks like there, and federal law enforcement officers used tear gas, used flashbangs to try and clear the crowds. You see the noise, and you hear the noise rather, going on right there. This was quite the contrast to what you're seeing live at the moment, but it's sort of been on and off. If we can take a listen, let's go ahead and see. I'll go quiet for a moment so we can listen into the sound. Let's clear it. Once again, that was from earlier. Protesters trying to block a U.S. Marshals service bus as federal law enforcement officers using tear gas, flashbangs. You heard it pop there in the video to clear away the crowd. You saw the truck, or the bus rather, honking at protesters as well. There were a number of people with their hands up to the front trying to sort of push it away. But this was one of the heights of earlier this morning of the protests we've been keeping an eye on. And right now on the left side of your screen is the live footage that you're seeing coming out of Paramount right now, with law enforcement establishing a line, protesters getting up close. You see a sign there, a number of flags, a number of signs and banners being waved by a number of people out here in this area that we continue to monitor. So once again, we want to catch you up in case you are just seeing this for the first time. This is something that has stretched, these protests have stretched going back to yesterday, so this is not a necessarily isolated event. It is a continuation of things that we've been monitoring after ICE operations happening across Southern California. So this operation involving agents with ICE, which is Immigration and Customs Enforcement, led to dozens of arrests on Friday, so just yesterday. That, of course, then spurred large-scale, intense protests throughout the city. We were covering it for you here live on KCAL News, on Channel 9 and on Channel 2 as well, when we learned that ICE conducted raids in the Westlake District, in downtown LA, and South LA. That was all on Friday. According to an ICE spokesperson, as many as 44 arrests were made. Now, the ICE spokesperson was saying, quote, ICE officers and agents alongside partner law enforcement agencies executed 4 federal search warrants at 3 locations in central Los Angeles, and then confirmed the number of arrests, saying approximately 44 people were arrested. Now, protests after that centered around the federal building in downtown LA. We were monitoring that for you. Our Tom Waite was there live at the scene, as well as a couple of other crews, after word spread among demonstrators and protesters that were in the area that detainees were allegedly being held into that building. SkyCal was over that scene as well. Our Tom Waite mentioned that there was tear gas, other flashbangs being deployed, that he was feeling it for multiple minutes at certain points, and how intense that was for a stretch of time. So once again, that was the initial start of things going back to over 24 hours ago, or just about 24 hours ago. At this point, we also want to bring in and give you an update as we continue our live coverage here on KCAL News. Secretary Kristi Noem, Homeland Security Secretary, was just sent a post on X, and this is the latest that we're pulling up right now as of just half an hour ago. She says, quote, a message to the LA rioters: you will not stop us or slow us down. ICE will continue to enforce the law, and if you lay a hand on a law enforcement officer, you will be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law. And then on top of that, it's just one of many pieces from folks in the Trump administration explaining their processes as we continue to monitor this situation, and reiterating essentially what Secretary Noem is saying in that specific post. I want to draw attention to the U.S. Attorney Bill Asaley. This is someone that was directly cited last night by our very own Mike Rogers as well. He sent a post this morning saying, quote, federal law enforcement operations are proceeding as planned this weekend in Los Angeles County. I urge the public to refrain from interfering with these lawful actions, and anyone who obstructs federal agents will face arrest and prosecution. Now, to tie this all together as well, because we've been seeing a number of law enforcement agencies on the scene, we did reach out to the Sheriff's Department, and there has been a prior statement by Sheriff Luna that, quote, the LA County Sheriff's Department does not participate in any civil immigration enforcement activities or mass deportation sweeps. So these are federal agencies executing these warrants, other operations as they deem fit across Southern California. Now, of course, that has led to all of these protests and a number of protesters making their voices heard in many ways going into the evening and going into the morning as well. So right now, we're keeping an eye on this situation in Paramount. You notice the wide view from SkyCal, that stretch of highway, a stretch of freeway there blocked off on 2 sides. This is the main front right now, the main thoroughfare. As you see, it almost looks like some traffic is trying to make its way through. Some cars here on the left side of your screen, but really a number of protesters establishing themselves counter to law enforcement on the other side. That line has sort of stayed steady, the line of cars and the line of people as well. You see a number of flags. They all look like the Mexican flag being waved on top of other banners and other people as well. It is important to note, though, that the context of this particular site that we're looking at right now is not to the level of intensity that we saw from the video we played to you earlier, or really from spots of coverage that we were keeping an eye on last night. Those were wildly different levels of intensity in activity. That's not to say that that can't happen again, as we've seen things fluctuate on and off throughout the evening, different parts of the area, and of course, depending on what else is going on. So right now, as we keep an eye on this, is the other side of the freeway and the intersection there. You see the Home Depot on the corner of your screen, and right at the intersection, it looks like a lot of debris, trash, and other people just sort of walking around. That is on Atlantic, and it's hard to tell what exactly is going on, if people are just rather picking stuff up, walking around, or otherwise. But once again, keeping an eye on this situation, we have SkyCal up for you. We have a photographer on the scene as well. And we also have our Zach Boetto, who is heading down there also to keep an eye on the situation for us. We'll check in with him at some point, either in the next few minutes or so, whenever he gets set up and ready. Obviously, you got to find a safe place and a good place to operate from, and to give us a good perspective and view from the ground. But otherwise, we also have our evening newscast coming up later tonight to keep you posted on what's going on. So we'll maintain this view here right now, as you keep seeing there in Paramount a number of pieces of trash, debris, and people sort of scattered around, and a significant law enforcement presence. At some point, we do want to show you, as we've now crossed the 2:30 half-hour mark here, that video earlier, but there you see a number of law enforcement and agents. That's the video we were talking about from earlier, where things were a little bit more heated, where you have that U.S. Marshal Service bus and protesters going directly into contact with it. You have horns blaring, honking, a number of people trying to push it back, seems like, and then the sounds of flashbangs and tear gas. I'm going to go ahead and quiet down so we can play the sound for you, so you can actually take a listen to what was going on here earlier. Once again, that was video from earlier, as protesters tried to block a U.S. Marshal Service bus in Paramount, and federal law enforcement officers using tear gas. You heard it there, and flashbangs, heard that as well, to clear the crowd. That is one of the highest levels of tension we've seen at this point today. We continue to monitor the situation as you take a live look on the left side of your screen. That is a live picture from SkyCal right now down in Paramount. Not a lot of people and a lot of activity going on, in the sense that there's a lot to keep track of, but not to the same degree as what you see on the right side of your screen. So to catch you up, just in case, as we sort of circle back and reestablish ourselves and try to reset for you, of course, immigration raids protests continue in Southern California. We are keeping an eye on Paramount right now. You see some gas there. Hard to tell if that's from something burning or if that is from some deployment of tear gas or otherwise at some point in this afternoon. But that is the heavy law enforcement presence that you see collected there on the corner of your screen. This is just one piece of it, mind you. There's not a lot of people, or I should say protesters, that you see really in this immediate area, though you do see a number of officers. Looks like they're just standing side by side and establishing a line on that one corner of the street. But this is something that stretches back after a day of ICE operations across Southern California. This goes back to yesterday. An immigration operation in LA involved agents with ICE that led to dozens of arrests on Friday. That, of course, then spurred a number of protests across the area. We do want to confirm to you that ICE did conduct raids. That was in the Westlake District, that was in downtown LA, that was South LA, all on Friday. And according to an ICE spokesperson, 44 arrests were made. As we zoom out here in SkyCal and give you this live view, the widest view coming from SkyCal. I had to pause for a second as we're going to take you to some video of protesters throwing things at Border Patrol. Once we can cue that up, we'll show you there. That's from earlier. Once again, U.S. Customs and Border Patrol vehicle there, and a number of protesters throwing things at those vehicles and seemingly trying to push these vehicles back. You see it almost looks like a milk carton was thrown and then poured on top of that vehicle as well. A number of folks running behind it. We're looping it back for you. just for a hair there, and showing you just the chaotic scene going on there right now as we continue to catch you up on what exactly has been going on to those multiple ICE raids that were happening yesterday. The protests eventually centered around the federal building in downtown LA. That was after word spread among demonstrators that detainees were allegedly being held in that building. Now, at this point, more clashes have started up going back to the early morning hours. The LA County Sheriff's Department confirmed that today another protest erupted in Paramount. That is where you're taking a live look at KCAL right now, after it appeared that federal law enforcement officers were conducting another operation. We are still working to confirm what exactly happened in that regard, if another operation was happening, but Trump administration officials, Homeland Security, and the FBI have confirmed that there are operations going as planned over the weekend, this specific weekend. I'll get to those statements in just a second. But after the LA County Sheriff's Department confirmed that this other protest started, they said in a statement that a large crowd was blocking traffic at one point in the 6400 block of Paramount Boulevard. That was a couple of hours ago. We're coming up on the 2-hour mark because that started at 12:42. Then CHP confirmed to us that officers were preparing for protesters at one point to march onto the 710 freeway, but so far, based on what we've been able to see, that hasn't started up. This has, of course, led to a lot of reaction. Protests themselves are explaining that in real time, keeping an eye on that. The latest we've gotten from Homeland Security officials, from FBI officials, I'm going to pull those statements up for you right now because Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem just sent out a post on X coming up on 40 minutes ago saying, and I'll quote it directly as you take a look at this live image from KCAL right now. It looks like someone rolling around on a bike or scooter. Looks like doing donuts there in the middle of the crowd with a number of protesters waving Mexican flags and other banners here in Paramount. Just on the other side of them is a line of law enforcement officers standing shoulder to shoulder. Going back to Noem's statement saying, quote, "A message to the LA rioters, you will not stop us or slow us down. ICE will continue to enforce the law, and if you lay a hand on a law enforcement officer, you will be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law." That ties directly into U.S. Attorney Bill Asaley saying in a post on X as well today, this was earlier in the morning, quote, "Federal law enforcement operations are proceeding as planned this weekend in Los Angeles County." So that goes to what's been happening so far. Going back to his quote, "I urge the public to refrain from interfering with these lawful actions. Anyone who obstructs federal agents will face arrest and prosecution." So that is the latest from the U.S. Attorney Bill Asaley and from Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem. According to the LA Sheriff's Department, we already went over that, but I do want to reference a prior statement from Sheriff Luna because there is sometimes a bit of confusion as to whether or not local law enforcement participates in this sort of thing or how they get involved in this sort of thing. But according to the sheriff, reiterating, quote, "The LA County Sheriff's Department does not participate in any civil immigration enforcement activities or mass deportation sweeps. Immigration enforcement is the responsibility of federal law enforcement agencies, not the Sheriff's Department." So, of course, now we're in a situation that we continue to monitor live for you right here. That started back on Friday, and we will, of course, continue to maintain our eye on this for you. Once again, important to note that what you're looking at right now, we did show you video earlier. We'll give it a few minutes and we'll cue it up for you again just to give you a perspective as to how things have evolved and changed and gone on and off throughout the day, and even going back to last night, because there are ebbs and flows to these situations. Right now, this is relatively calm. This is calm compared to what we've been seeing before. Normally, or rather not normally, but we have seen in other situations tear gas, flashbangs, other means of disruption to disperse crowds being used by law enforcement. In other cases, it is exactly what you're seeing right now. This is the wide view on the opposite side of that freeway there. Roads blocked off, and law enforcement with heavy cars and presence just establishing themselves there. Previously, that's what we're talking about. I'll quiet down for just a second as we play this video for you one more time, because this is probably the height of what we've seen so far today when protesters were trying to block a U.S. Marshals Service bus. Take a listen. Two separate videos we just showed you there. The first one being protesters blocking a U.S. Marshals Service bus and federal law enforcement officers using tear gas, flashbangs to clear the crowd after it seemed like they were pushing up against the vehicle, vehicles honking at them to get out of the way. That it was a back and forth for a bit. This one is U.S. Customs and Border Patrol, a vehicle of theirs, trying to cross through traffic, and a number of folks, you see it there, pushing up against the vehicle, banging against the hood, others throwing what seemed like milk, a milk carton right there, onto the windshield and then throwing the bottle. Those have been the height of tensions that we've seen just today. So, I want to reiterate, and I want to make clear that this is just a piece of the grander picture. This is not indicative of every protest that we've seen. It's also not indicative of everything we've been covering for you going back to yesterday. So once again, this is live from KCAL, a grand picture up in Paramount right now, where you don't see much activity on the streets. You see the remnants of what's left, or seemingly of what's left, whether that's it's hard to, there's some cinder blocks there, and we saw that elsewhere near a Home Depot as well. There is some, it's inverted, so I want to pull back from KCAL as well because there is a bit of profanity, it looks like, on the road too. So we didn't get a clear shot of it, but it almost looks like it was. Those are the carts seemingly from Home Depot that are tossed aside on the road, one person riding their bike. And then as we pan over and just cross the street, that is the other line of law enforcement establishing themselves there. So nobody else is getting up of that. This is where the main hub of activity has established itself there in what looks like a market, but a number of vehicles and law enforcement established there, shoulder to shoulder, and protesters just going up to them. At times we've seen some, hard to describe it as yelling, or rather perhaps it was just a conversation. From our vantage point, that is almost impossible to tell, obviously, but a number of flags, a number of banners, and everything being waved. It looks like you're seeing an American flag, you're seeing a Mexican flag, multiple Mexican flags as well. That's the predominant one out there right now. A bit of traffic more. This is the main hub of congestion. But right now, keeping an eye on this for you. We have KCAL overhead. We have a crew on the ground. We have our reporter and photographer, Zach Boeto, heading down there as well to give you a better perspective of what the ground looks like, because this is just one slice of a grander piece of immigration raids protests that have been happening here in Southern California and the LA area going back to yesterday. But once again, I want to reiterate that it seems like these will continue, at least that's according. And we want to get to, want to wrap up my original thought there, that there are more presumably more raids or ICE operations going to be happening. That's according to federal officials. But right now it looks someone rather animated there in the middle of your screen. We also want to get to some video earlier of more protesters seemingly from the ground throwing things.
They're throwing that, Carmen, tear gases. Oh my God.
There you go.
They're throwing tear gases.
And that's one of the U.S. Marshals Service buses. Not sure if that's the exact one we showed you earlier, but regardless, that is one piece of the grander activity. You saw the tear gas, you saw everything else being deployed, and that's the one we're talking about, where people were pushing up against the vehicle trying to get it to stop. And you see the remnants of gas, you see everything else, and then officials waving the bus through the police tape and trying to keep a clear separation between protesters and everything else. So again, the dichotomy of the situation here, as we give you the live picture on the left side of your screen, the video from earlier on the right side of your screen, happening at separate times. Obviously the tensions being as heightened earlier, or more heightened earlier, compared to what we're seeing right now, where a number of protesters are out, right there face-to-face or close to face-to-face with law enforcement, but nothing escalating to the point of what those videos earlier have shown, which is throwing things at law enforcement vehicles or Border Patrol vehicles or U.S. Service Marshals, U.S. Marshals Service vehicles, and tear gas or anything else being deployed as of right now. Of course, this is a fluid situation. Things have drastically changed at times, with minutes on a dime, left and right, going back to last night when we first started covering this for you. But right now, seemingly just at a standstill. Law enforcement there side to side, and strong number of protesters keeping an eye on this section of Paramount. I want to reiterate that as we've zoomed out before for you and given you a wider look, this is where the main hub of activity is, and we haven't seen to this level other protesters and the same number of law enforcement elsewhere. We have seen other law enforcement vehicles just on the other side of this overpass as we pan there for you right now. But notice no protesters and really not even that much law enforcement compared to what you just saw. And even further down the street as well is where we have seen other folks sort of go back and forth, and other law enforcement officers standing there shoulder to shoulder with other people, and some debris lingering on the road there as well. Now, actually, it would draw attention to a number of folks right here on the bottom right hand of your screen, and it looks like, I don't want to make assumptions, perhaps they are protesters as well, but you do know it's hard to ignore the fact that many of them are wearing the same shirt and perhaps are doing this in unison. There are a number of shirts there and a number of people all together. That's the Home Depot sign and the number of Home Depot carts that you notice on the middle of the road there. This is where we see sort of a straggling of more people and that heavy law enforcement presence right there on the corner of Atlantic. This is, compared to what we saw on the other side of that overpass, seems like just as much, if not a higher number of law enforcement. So once again, a very fluid situation right now. All of this going on in Paramount right now, a continuation of ICE raid protests that have happened since yesterday and clashes with federal law enforcement. The ups and downs, the chaos of it all. We will continue to monitor this for you. We have KCAL overhead, we have us here in studio, and we have multiple crews out in the field as well. So keep an eye on KCAL News, both here and on Channel 2 throughout the rest of the evening. We'll continue to monitor this for you, and we'll bring you the very latest from the scene as this situation continues to develop, not just in Paramount, but across Southern California. For now, we'll get you back to regularly scheduled programming.